48 hours. That is how long Claude Fable 5 has been in public hands. In that time, someone one-shotted a playable horror game from a single prompt, live. The model beat Pokémon using nothing but raw screenshots. A Hacker News user watched it crack in 30 minutes, a reverse engineering problem that had stumped every other frontier model. And Stripe says it migrated 50 million lines of code in a single day. The internet is calling it magic. So I tracked down the wildest builds of the first 48 hours, verified every single one back to its source, and ranked them in 4 tiers. Because under every one of these demos, there is a number that almost nobody is putting in their viral threads. What it actually burned. Fable 5 is free inside Claude subscriptions right now, and on June 23rd, the meter switches on. So here are the wildest things people have already built, tier by tier, with the receipts and the real bill. And the last tier is the one that should change what you do this week. Quick context, because it explains everything you are about to see. On June 9th, Anthropic shipped Fable 5, the public version of its Mythos class model, and the most capable thing it has ever handed to ordinary users. I decoded the full announcement in my last video, so here is the one paragraph that matters today. From launch through June 22nd, Fable 5 is included at no extra cost on Pro, Max, Team, and Enterprise plans. From June 23rd, it requires usage credits. And at API list prices, it runs $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens. That is exactly double Opus 4.8. So right now, thousands of people are holding the strongest model on the market with the meter unplugged. That is why the last 48 hours exploded. Let's start the countdown. Tier 1, the one-shot toys. On launch day, the front page of r/Singularity was a clip titled, "It's Over, Claude Fable 5 One-Shots Horror Game, Live." One prompt goes in, agents spin up, a playable horror game comes out the other side. Over on r/Claude AI, a thread called Fable 5 is actually insane, filled up with one-shot volumetric clouds, flight physics, water, waves, and procedural islands. And Wharton professor Ethan Mollick, who had pre-release access, asked it for Balatro, but for the game of coin flips. He got a genuinely fun little game where every visual is generated mathematically. No art assets, nothing downloaded. He did the same with a self-aware snake game and a game about descending into the depths. He even asked for a 10-page rhyming poem about a haircut where every single word starts with the letter S. It did that too, in one session. But here is the tier 1 receipt. Over on r/vibe coding, a user sent one complex prompt, 1, and watched half of their daily usage limit vanish. The toys are real. They are just not free shaped. They are subsidized. To be fair, Anthropic started this. The launch demos were built to melt the internet. Fable 5 beat Pokémon Fire Red using nothing but raw screenshots. No maps, no helper tools, no navigation aids. A game that previous Claude models could not finish, even with extra scaffolding bolted on. It autonomously played Factorio, the factory building game, strategizing and expanding on its own. It derived planetary motion from physics first principles, built a working solar system simulator, and then used that simulator to predict real eclipses. And it coded a fluid simulation synchronized to an EDM remix of classical music that the model itself composed, in code. Now, those are vendor demos. Polished, hand-picked. Every launch has them. The reason this one feels different is that within hours, random people on the internet were posting things in the same league. Which brings us to tier 2. Tier 2 is my favorite tier. The nothing else could do this tier. On Hacker News, a user called Bottle Palm threw an old console game's reverse engineering problem at Fable 5. A problem that had already stumped both Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5. Solved in 30 minutes. Another user had spent weeks on the previous model doing emulation work for the PlayStation game Tomba. Fable finished the job. A third watched it fix satellite map reprojection by writing a quarter of a coordinate library from memory in a different programming language than the original. And on r/Claude AI, one of the top posts of day 2 was a developer whose custom GPU physics engine had a bug that no model could find. Fable 5 diagnosed it. Same subreddit. Another developer called it a mature, calm, down to earth programmer after it quietly solved a platform bug that Opus had been circling for days. Notice the pattern here. These are not toys. These are specific, gnarly, weeks of your life problems. This is the tier that made senior engineers sit up. But people kept pushing. What happens if you give this thing not minutes but hours? Tier 3, the marathon builds. Ethan Mollick handed Fable 5 a multi page specification and watched it work alone for 9.5 hours. It built a research tool called Concord that takes in multiple datasets and calibrates human judgments against AI judgments. His verdict: researchers have needed this for years. It was just never profitable for anyone to build. Across his testing, he says it would keep executing for up to 12 hours on multi page specs. His wildest experiment was an isochrone map, a map of how long it takes to travel anywhere on Earth. Fable researched over 2,200 real flight routes, TGV and Shinkansen rail schedules, and per country road speeds pulled from academic papers. And it spun up its own sub-agents to verify the data while other agents wrote the code. Meanwhile, Simon Willison, one of the most respected developers in open source, shipped a real release of his LLM library that he says Fable almost entirely wrote, then had it build the sandboxed Python system he had wanted for ages. But the marathon receipts cut both ways. Mollick is blunt. It burns tokens at twice Opus prices. The conjuring happens somewhere he cannot watch. And a software engineer still has to iron out the remaining bugs at the end. 9.5 hours of frontier compute is not a rounding error. Hold that thought for the meter. Tier 4, industrial scale. Stripe got early access, pointed Fable 5 at a 50 million line Ruby code base, and ran a migration in a single day that Anthropic says would have taken a whole team about 2 months by hand. An engineer at Canva who tested it before launch reported that the code diffs were surgical, that it used roughly half the tokens of the previous model for better results, and called it a step change, worthy of the 5 in the name. Another early tester fed it a 50-page PDF of dense, interconnected specifications, and it correctly mapped what was implemented, what was half done, and what was missing entirely. You will not see this tier in the viral threads because it is happening quietly inside companies. But this is the tier that explains why Anthropic priced this model the way they did. Which brings us to the part of this video nobody else is making: the meter. Here is the number underneath everything you just saw. On r/Claude AI, one developer did exactly what I wish everyone did. They set Fable 5 as their Claude Code default on launch day, and they metered every single token. Day 1 usage. Priced at API rates, $210.15. Amount actually paid 0, because the free window absorbed all of it. One developer, 1 day, $210 of frontier compute. Now run that math back across the tiers. The vibe coding user lost half a daily limit to a single prompt. Mollick ran 9.5 hours in one sitting, and he never published the bill. At $10 in and $50 out per million tokens, you can guess why almost nobody is publishing theirs. So here is the honest frame for the last 48 hours. It is not just that the model got smarter. It is that for 2 weeks, the strongest model on the market costs subscribers nothing extra, and everyone is swinging as hard as they can before June 23rd. The viral threads are not lying to you, they are just not showing you the meter. And there is one more thing they are not showing you either. Fable 5 ships with safety classifiers. And when one of them trips, anything that smells like offensive security work and broad areas of biology and chemistry, your request does not return an error. It silently gets answered by Opus 4.8, the older model, and nothing on your screen tells you the swap happened. Anthropic says this hits fewer than 5% of sessions and admits the tuning is conservative. Maulik is less polite. He says the filters trip at the faintest hint of a security problem and that it happens way too often. Why does that matter in a video about wild builds? Because if your version of the wildest thing touches security research, or reverse engineering, or biotech, there is a real chance the model answering you is not Fable at all. And you would never know. Test your real topics before the free window closes, which is exactly what the playbook is for. Because here is what the first 48 hours actually teach. And it is not go one shot a horror game. Look at who got the most out of this model. Maulik walked in with a backlog of tools he had wanted for years. Willison walked in with a library feature he had been circling for months. The Hacker News testers walked in with specific problems that had already beaten every other model. The people winning this window did not show up with a chat box. They showed up with a list of impossible things. So, for the next 11 days, while the meter is unplugged, here is the plan. Day 1, your stuck bug. The one that has been open for months. That is a tier 2 problem, and it might be 30 minutes now. Next, your marathon. Write the multi-page spec for the tool you have always needed and let it run for hours while you sleep. That is tier 3. Meter everything like that Reddit developer did, so that on June 23rd, you know exactly what your workflow costs and whether double Opus pricing is worth it for your work. And if you work anywhere near security or biology, run your real topics now for free and find out whether you are even getting Fable. The window closes June 22nd. The people with a list are going to spend it very differently from the people with a chat box. I put all of it into a free guide. Every build from this video, tier by tier, with direct links to every thread and post, so you can verify each one yourself. The burn math, the silent downgrade test, and the 11-day playbook with the exact prompts to start tonight. Comment the word wildest and I will send it to you. Free. If this saved you a week of scrolling threads, subscribe. The free window ends June 22nd, and I am testing what this model can really do all the way to the deadline. I drop bite-sized AI breakdowns every day on Instagram, and the full deep dives, like this one, right here on YouTube. I will see you in the next one.